some people think we're on mushrooms when we're talking about the stats and the analysis, but that's not the case. Derek McNamara is here with us to introduce some sense to proceedings, some facts.
Yeah, facts. Who's saying that?
It's the clip.
Right. Sorry about that.
It was a Kildare Gaelic football pod who it turns out were tempting fate horribly, but we'll get to them later on in the season. Anyway.
Yeah, good weekend. Well, the English Welsh game is a bit dare, wasn't it? But apart from that, the games were pretty great.
I got stopped the other day by a man who works in analytics and says this is the best analytics slot in any sport that he's heard. And at the same time, one of my mates was like, "That's bullshit. I can't believe you're doing that."
Yeah.
So
it's so funny because I was going to say this, but my mom rang me there last week and she was like, "No, I didn't like last week's one. It's too technical." I was like, all right.
Thanks,
which is fair enough, good feedback, bad feedback. And I suppose, look, that is exactly what my job is, right? Like it's trying to make the game digestible and understandable, whether my mom's only 29, obviously, but if you're at that age, and then also you've also got the people that are heavily involved in this sport, the guys that are the coaches, the analysts, the old guard, the people who've been there for forever, who would look at this stuff and say, it's not for me. It's too data driven. But I suppose it's my job to try and to help and improve and help those guys understand that, look, there's too much happening in the game for one person to look at the game. And I suppose the other side of it is that the coaches that are at the top, they are able to do this to a certain extent, but they don't have any ammunition that we can bring to those coaches, to those people involved in these teams, to help them understand. Okay, we can now measure something in a way that we've never measured something before, so that we can actually make small improvements in our team, whether you're at the top of the league or you're at the bottom of the league.
All sports have gone through this revolution over the last decade and a half. You worked for PFF for a while. In American football, this happened, and there's like, I don't need those stats, thanks very much. I'm an old school coach. I can shout at my players and inspire them to greatness. I know everything with my eyes. It passes the eye test. And in football, it's fairly similar. There's like a massive analytics movement. We've seen it reach certain points where it's now influencing increasingly player signings, and some clubs are using it really well, other clubs are not using it really well, and I guess rugby is catching up with those sports.
I don't know whether it has started that movement yet, and which is really exciting for us because we're kind of at the start, but there is rugby is still very much in the dark ages when it comes to a lot of things, and data and analytics would be one of them, but also the idea around people coming in that haven't played before or haven't played at the highest level.
People are suspicious of that.
Very much so. Yeah. Like the vast majority of people, and which is fair enough, right? Because that's all they've known, right? But at the same time, there are literally thousands, if not millions of people out there who didn't have the skills or the expertise or the background, or didn't go to the right rugby school, or didn't get coaching when they're younger, or got injured, or got concussions. There's all these. There's more of them than there is the guys that were there. And somebody like myself who does look at the game differently to most people, but I went and I did my crap jobs, where I did these crap jobs after leaving school or going to college, university. I learned these lessons and these skills that players could never have learned. They could never done the skills of learning Excel and learning development and software and analytics and data. There's no way that you could have done both. So the point is that the rugby community needs to understand that, these things are going to come into the sport no matter what.
Yeah, and it turns out that there are people within the rugby communities who are happy to be in the vanguard of this and are leaning on your expertise and taking advantage of it.
Absolutely, but like the point is that we're not coming to try and push anybody out of the way or change anything for the negative. This analysis, this data, this information is purely to help the sport improve. That's the only reason it exists, is to help players, help coaches, help analysts, help the people that making decisions, so that they can measure what the impact is that they have on the game.
Was there a tangible time in which rugby started to embrace analysis and data? Like, was the dawn of the professional era? Was it even more recently than that, when teams and nations were like, well, this
I'm
actually makes
sure
sense?
there'd be a lot of people that'll turn around and say, "Oh, Derek, you're full of shit," right now. But like the vast majority of coaches, nearly all the coaches that I would know, very few of them are making decisions based on data-driven analysis.
Right.
The majority of analysts that are in the teams would be based around creating video clips that would enhance the chances of a coach understanding. So they're not really making, because the way in which data has been absorbed, calculated or enhanced and then provided back to teams is still very much in its infancy. You're still using Excel, you're still using there's no one real analysis platform where you can go in and interact with data in a way that you can make decisions. And that's exactly what we're doing. You know, we're taking, and I hear this a lot where, you know, analysts would be like, "Oh, you know, that could take my job, you know, this data." And it's like, like the introduction of I think one of my friends was saying, you know, the introduction of the plough, and then, you know, a combine harvester. The idea of that taking a job it's not the same. It's like, just, you can do more. You can actually have more impact.
Frees up time for other things.
Yeah, hugely. Like we're doing the grunt work, and what that allows, what our analysis allows these teams to do, is spend so much more time coaching, because like that's fundamentally what all these guys want to do. But like what we also try to do as well is we try to help with different people who have different ways of learning. So like I personally have dyslexia, right? So I learn by visually seeing things. I like, giving me a paragraph of words, I really struggle with it. But then people understand by listening. So we'll have information around what the data means by allowing people to learn from listening. But we'll also have the data, we'll also have the graphs, we'll also have, so that's what we're trying to just do, is trying to cater for all these different types of learning, because people that are involved in sport tend to not be the people that read a lot because they have the skills and they have their expertise by using their hands and their head. So there's so much going on, and I'm hoping that we're kind of like, we're not the start of it, because there's always going to be other companies out there that have started this, but we're trying to bring everything together to try and make that next step and help those teams improve.
Okay, so that's the culture war that's raging within the sport at the moment. Let's distill it down to this week. We've I mean, obviously it's Irish rugby, so there's a 10 debate and a fascination / preoccupation /
the last
worry.
3 days putting this together for you. I hope you like it.
So
so
it's actually worked out perfectly in terms of the ability to compare Sexton and Byrne. They've basically played the same amount of time. Yeah,
so I guess this first slide that we're going to put up for people that aren't that are listening, we basically compared Sexton to Byrne just from the Six Nations. And when we looked at this first slide is kind of like what is. This is the first kind of analysis that is currently provided by providers out there. And in it we show both players played, Sexton has played 116 minutes and Byrne has played 121, so very, very close level of analysis that we can do a comparison against. When we boil that down to actual game minutes, so time of ball in play, Sexton's at 56 and Byrne is at 57. And then the number of possessions. So this is the number of times that both players have actually touched the ball. And Sexton only has 52, with Byrne 66. So there's a little bit of discrepancy. So Byrne's getting more involved in the game. And that could be because he's coming on as a substitute. You know, at the end of the game, he's more involved in the game. But that's probably why. So that's kind of our starting point. You know, how many possessions did they have? How much time did they spend on the pitch? And then when we look at what actually the output of those possessions, so what actually happened by each player, we look at their passing roughly around the same. So 77% of the time they're passing the ball. So once they get the ball, they pass it. Sexton kicks the ball 13% and Byrne kicks 21%. So Byrne kicks reasonably bigger mounted ball, and Sexton carries the ball into contact a little bit more. So that's just from a higher, very high level. This is what the two players do. This is what they do when they get the ball. And this is the current state at which analysis exists.
Okay, that's the type of stuff you're getting on your TV coverage.
Yeah.
The next layer down.
Yeah. So then basically what we do is we take all the information from the games, okay, and we say, okay, well, who's the best? And when we look at the passing grade, so we want to just primarily look at the passing, for instance. Sexton comes out as number 1 in passing, and that's because he's the most accurate.
Number 1 in the tournament.
In the tournament, yeah.
So this isn't just versus number 1 versus Ross Byrne, it's versus all the other out halves.
Correct. Yeah, I think there was 13 10s altogether. That we have a minimum threshold of inputs that players need to have. But of these, Sexton comes out, and 77% of what they do when they get the ball is passing. That's the thing we want to look at primarily. And when Ross Byrne, we take the same amount of information. Ross Byrne comes out at 3rd. He's very close to 4th, but the difference between 1st and 3rd is substantial. Okay, so we're looking at pass left, pass right, accuracy, speed, distance, discrepancies between those three. So there's literally 20 or 30 different aspects that we take into consideration when we look at this passing grade.
Okay, so that's the first one there. The passing accuracy is next.
Yeah, so Sexton has a passing accuracy of...
He's number 1 and Ross Byrne's number 6.
Yeah, so we basically grade each pass out of 5, 1 to 5. And Sexton's passing grade is a 4.4, so it's nearly perfect, like basically. And that's the ability to make a pass and hit the player that's coming onto the ball right in front of their hands. Okay, so that's basically the passes out in front. Anything that's a little bit high or low, we give a 4. Anything that's above the head or below the waist is a 3, and 2 is a ball that goes to the ground, and 1 is a turnover. So Sexton's right up there with the 4.4 of accuracy, but Ross Byrne is at a 4.1, which is average. It's right there, ballpark average when it comes to passing as a 10. And what that affects is that kind of affects everything else in Byrne's arsenal, if you want to call it that, because that's what brings him down. That's what he would need. If I was coaching, if I was working with Ross, I'd be saying, you need to learn how far you pass the ball, which is the next one that we're looking at.
Average pass distance.
Yeah, and the Irish guys are much smaller passing distance than the average. So the average is around a 5.7 metre pass. Ross Byrne is at a 4.5 metre pass, and Sexton's at a 4.8. So like the idea here is that we can identify what they're doing, when they're doing it, why they're doing it, and then we can identify how well they're doing these activities.
Okay, so the average pass distance, Ireland being 11th and 12th, would suggest that that's by design.
Yeah. So we wouldn't weight that heavily towards the grade.
Okay.
So, but it is part of the actual overall grade. We do take it into consideration.
Okay, and the first receiver depth is the last one on the passing stats here.
Yeah.
Sexton's 3 and Ross Byrne's 1.
Yeah. So from the distance, so the average depth of receiver for a 10 is 5.7 metres from the game line. Ross Byrne is hitting that game line at a 4.5 and Sexton at 4.8. So that's, we've heard this quite a lot, that he's able to take the ball to the line quite a lot, which is true to a certain extent. But, what we'll do, we might go into in a second, is it only kind of tells half the story. So that receiver depth, he's doing what he's been asked to do, so he's getting up to the line. The only problem is that he's not coming onto the ball. He can be quite stationary when he gets the ball, compared to Sexton, who also runs onto the ball and is flat and is taking on the receiver or the defenders. So
these are subtle enough differences, but quite fundamental when it comes to the output.
Yeah, and then so basically the next slide then is basically we kind of pulling all that together. And basically what we're saying here is that this is kind of an overall what both players are doing. So we showed the output to begin with when they get the ball, but this is just showing, where each player is doing what they're doing, the skill sets on top. But from a quality, so from what their actual players are doing, carrying is another one that Johnny is, he's significantly better than what Ross is doing, as well as the passing. So these two areas are the two main areas as to why it's a significant difference between the two, and how whether or not we can put that affects the team as much when it's put in I think we had only 7 of the starting players start last weekend, and we were still able to implement the same game plan. Whether or not these two areas can significantly
influence the outcome,
is the next question. And
okay.
I would say that they don't. I would say that we have enough players and leaders in that team to negate this problem.
Okay, and if you're, it's funny, just when you were talking about the passing and the importance of it, when Joe Schmidt came into Leinster, Brian just told the story that Schmidt said he wants to make Leinster the best passing team in Europe, and they were kind of like, well, what's the big deal about that? But actually, if you think about it, the difference between the accurate pass and the difference between a 5 and a 4 is that the speed. You've seen the speed of hands that Ireland have at the moment, where the ball can, like, everybody looks a little bit like Finn Russell at times, and the difference that makes is that suddenly there's a gap where there wasn't one, and so the speed of passing and the accuracy of the passing has a knock-on impact on your ability to implement your game plan.
Massive. And so fixing a player is something huge, and it's so basically fixing a player is the ability to get the ball and take a step and fix that player on you as a defending player. That's what a 5 grade pass is where the ball is able to hit the when you pass the ball to a player, it hits the player, and the player is able to then fix the player either left or right.
France scored a try at the weekend where Ntamack just took the ball and ran straight, and kept looking straight and passed the ball without looking away, and you're like, oh Jesus, that's pretty impressive.
And that's exactly what we look at. And Jimmy O'Brien did it as well against South Africa, where he got the ball running into 22 and fixed the player and put the pass out into the corner to set up the try. It seems quite small, but we've been looking at it and grading it since we started.
This might sound like a stupid question, Derek, but on that first graph you had, so Ross Byrne opted to kick 21% of the time versus 13% Sexton, and Sexton obviously carries the ball a lot more than Ross. Does that, and this is maybe a bit of fear in this question, does that make Johnny Sexton more liable, more prone to injury because he's carrying the ball a lot more into tackles than Ross Byrne?
That's funny you say that, because we also look at the amount of times a player's first or second receiver. So basically, where I looked at this yesterday, so there wasn't too much of a discrepancy between the two, but I'm trying to find it here. Sorry, no, it's not good radio. But basically, there was a little bit of discrepancy. Yeah, so here it is. So there's around a 5% discrepancy between Sexton being first or second receiver. So where Sexton is being protected is that he's behind the first receiver at that pod, that forwards pod. So that's the way you're protecting him. But most definitely, the reason why Johnny is such a good player is that he's able to fix those defenders. He's able to bring the ball to the line and, have a late hit on or a tackle without the ball, we call it. And he would have the most with those where he gets tackled off the ball. But the idea is that, that's part of the game. You're gonna have to be able to
stand in the pocket.
Yeah. Stand in the pocket.
Exactly. Hits,
so the last slide that we have is just so when we take all that information, so for just tens, we look at I think I counted them before I came on. We had 91 separate grades that we grade specifically. We then weight them accordingly based on their skill set. So here we have production is basically who has the most amount of activity in the Six Nations so far. We don't have the Wales England game or the Scotland France game in here just yet. But basically we split them by carrying, tackling, passing, kicking and turnovers for the tens.
So before the Scotland game at the weekend, Finn Russell was number 1?
Yeah, just about with Sexton behind him. But I would imagine this would switch based on this weekend's games.
Finn Russell was pretty good to the eye.
He is. No, he is the eye. But I think I
player of the tournament in the London Times this morning.
People get bamboozled by sex appeal and throwing passes. But I mentioned this last week. I was like, just watch out for that skip pass. That's how you get him. And that was the game there last weekend. That skip pass he gave was the intercept, I think.
Yeah.
So like there's. And these guys would have been playing against Finn Russell every week, so they would have known its strengths and weaknesses. So I don't know. I'd be sleeping on Finn Russell, but I've been saying this for years. He's very, very hit and miss, and like he's a great, brilliant, amazing player. Don't get me wrong.
Notwithstanding that, like he's neck and neck with Sexton after the same, because obviously Sexton didn't play at the weekend either. So
because in this analysis he had 2 really good games, but his underlying issue has always been consistency and always, not falling off the game. And when we'll have this game done by next week and we can come back to this and I can show you these numbers again, I would imagine he probably goes down to 2nd or 3rd after this weekend's game.
Okay, so just
come back to Sexton and come back to Byrne. So when we take all those 96 small bits of information and we weight them in a particular way and we look at all the information, although Sexton and Byrne were quite close to each other in the passing, Byrne skips down to overall 6th.
And in the graph, the previous one actually, they looked so on there's tiny little bits in the graph, but actually every point. So there's the graph. The bottom part of the graph is back up on the screen there. It's actually significant. If there's any divergence, it's massively significant because it makes up, as you're saying, 60 odd data points.
Yes. No, it takes up there's 93 data points, but behind that there's probably 50,000 points of input.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? We're talking about literally.
So if there's a small divergence on the graph, that's actually very significant.
Yeah. So we're talking about,
and that's why we have
bits of activity. So
and that's why we have the final one there, where. Just to read it out: Finn Russell's 1, Sexton's 2, Tommaso Allen's 3, Ntamack is 4, Garbisi's 5, and then Ross Byrne is 6. Sexton scores 70, and Ross Byrne's is 64.5. So there's a 5.5 point difference there, and as you're pointing out, that represents a significant difference in quality.
Yeah. Now this is only over 2 games, and you could say that, but I think the way in which we analyse games, the way in which we enhance the data, enrich the data, and then create this kind of an output. We're taking literally hundreds if not thousands of bits of information, calculating them and putting them into these buckets, and then what we do is we weight them based on what each position is doing. So if we were to look at all the players in the Six Nations, we would weight obviously second row much more heavily towards carrying, rucking and tackling than we would to passing, which is what a 10 and a 9 do.
So Sexton is clearly still our number 1, but Ross Byrne, the fall off is significant, but not as pronounced as we might have feared in the past.
Correct.
Right. So, and we can somewhat overcome any of the issues at the moment, given the strength of the team.
And if we were talking to Ross, we would be, a small thing that we can try and work on is just making those smaller, because again, we're only talking about a 4 or 5 metre pass. We want to make sure that pass is hitting right in front of the player, and looking at Sexton to emulate or help identify where those passes.
You're like a modern day Alan Turing, breaking the enigma code of the Six Nations. I love this. But there's so many possibilities and eventualities that it distills it quite nicely into.
Yeah, no,
why.
And I, my mother really, Sheila McNamara, I know she'd be scarlet now, but that did make, if we can help somebody like my mom digest this information, then we can get to the coaches, we can get to the analysts, we can get to the people running these organisations, because they think they know, but they don't know, if that makes sense. And this data will help them digest it and go, all right, okay, this makes more sense.
And just not going to sell it to France or South Africa or Scotland until after the World Cup.
Sure.
Tentative yes there, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. Derek, good stuff.
Yeah,
what are we going to do next week?
I don't know. I suppose we could probably just take a quick look at all the teams if you wanted to, or I suppose if people want to leave comments in the YouTube where they want to know something very specific, but we could probably look at each individual team and maybe see what lies ahead for the last 2 games.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. reactrugby.com.
Yeah, and we also loaded a whole load of game analysis from the different teams as well. So there's Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all the Six Nations games. We've a bunch of all the Ottoman International games online, so you can go in and see your best players and what they can do and what their analysis looks like.